And he's going to go for it here. Become immense, exile the whole graveyard. Kai, do you have anything? We know he doesn't. And there's a hand extension. Kenji Egashira is going to take this into Infect versus Absent Reanimator versus Kai Din. Oh, look at that Angel Serenity. Oh, where was that Lingering Souls? It was right at the top?
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Oh, man. It's always like that, too. That's why you don't look at the top of the deck.
Oh, I always look. I want to confirm.
Infect has been a controversial deck ever since its inception. The idea that a deck can make its opponent start with effectively half their life has been and continues to be a tilting mechanic and experience. It was hit by Modern's second ever ban list due to its ability to put out turn 2 kills with Blazing Shoal. Infect also caused one of the most lopsided matchups in Modern when it played against Ad Nauseam, being able to hilariously counter its anti-life loss effects. And despite this, Infect sees almost no play in the Modern metagame today. Now, while Modern has changed over the last 8 years, a deck that could kill on turn 2 and turn 3 like that being almost completely gone is a little strange. So today, let's check in on our old pal Infect and figure out what happened. Why does nobody play Infect?
Draw a card. Ugh. He whiffed. He found a Guessing Wolf front.
Yeah.
He says, yes, that resolves.
Breeding Pool, Might of Old Krosa, Swing 6, Vines of Astwood, kicked. That's 10. Game for Jessup.
Bernardo is on Scapeshift. Peter is on, well, you can guess, he has a Pendelhaven. In fact, Infect.
To get an idea of where Modern Infect is, let's take a look at a current list. Piloted to an impressive 12th place finish by Quinn Reed at SCG-Con Tampa, this list, on the surface, looks exactly like a classic Infect deck. You have your Infect creatures, your mana dorks, and of course, tons and tons of pump spells. Vines of Vastwood and Blossoming Defense are the double duty pump spells, granting extra damage or protection on your creatures if your opponent tries to remove them on your turn. Groundswell and Might of Old Krosa being 1 mana +4/+4s is impressive, but even more so with the newest pump spell in Infect, Scale Up. While old today, Scale Up made big waves when it was first revealed as a way for Infect to pull off a turn 2 kill. Scale Up plus either Groundswell or Might of Old Krosa was 10 Infect, killing your opponent dead. Of course, no Infect deck would be complete without some amount of Inkmoth Nexus. An Infect man land is very strong in the deck and has been used in other archetypes like Affinity throughout Modern's history. Its ability to dodge sorcery speed or non-land permanent removal makes it a surprisingly resilient creature. But okay, hang on a second. This deck looks vaguely familiar to the Infect decks I remember, but there are some differences between it and Infect decks of old. So let's go back in the Wayback Machine to see what's changed for Infect. This list, piloted in 2016 to a first place finish at SCG Modern IQ Halstead by Hank Mead, looks vaguely similar to the deck we just looked at. However, a few things really stick out. For one, Hank's list is on 9 fewer creatures. That's over 2 playsets worth. And that shows, as this list runs only 9 Infect creatures, with our current day list at a whopping 15. 2016 Infect did not have Scale Up or Blossoming Defense yet, so those cards are instead copies of Become Immense and Apostle's Blessing, respectively. Perfectly usable for this time period. 2 main deck copies of Twisted Image looks funny now, but keep in mind that not only was Affinity a big player, but removal-heavy decks like Jund were also on top of the meta, so Spellskite was a common sideboard piece, both for it and the decks around it. Twisted Image was a 1-mana solution to Spellskite that cycled itself. It's a funny relic of its time. And speaking of a relic of its time, there is a playset of one specific card in this list. And this card was incredibly important to Infect, and we would lose only half a year after this event. Gitaxian Probe was all over the place in Modern at this time, and both Zoo and Infect were top abusers of it. For the low price of just 2 life, it could replace itself and give you perfect information of your opponent's hand. Now in Zoo, this was especially important as a 2 life cycler since you're playing Death Shadow. In Infect, it gave you the ability to have perfect information of your opponent's hand so you knew whether or not you could safely go all in. Because not only did a playset of Gitaxian Probes mean you were playing with functionally a 56 card deck, one of Infect's biggest weaknesses is, well, it needs to use pump spells. At any point, your opponent could respond with removal and blow you out right on the spot. And the protection spells helped, but you only have so many of those. Smart players would bait out your protection spells by using their removal on your turn, so you couldn't get the benefit of pumping your creature while you're attacking. But Gitaxian Probe changed all this. Now you could see your opponent's hand for 2 life and know if they were holding interaction, and if you were in the clear to go for lethal. Unfortunately for Infect, Gitaxian Probe's perfect information was a little too strong, and on January 9th, 2017, Gitaxian Probe alongside Golgari Grave Troll was banned in Modern. Without the ability to gain perfect information, Infect's ability to go all in when they didn't know the matchup, or even when they did know the matchup, got a lot harder. And yes, that was kind of the point of banning Gitaxian Probe, because Wizards specifically mentioned all-in decks on the reasons why they banned Gitaxian Probe, so decks like Infect. But because of this, Infect's inability to gain perfect information on their opponent's hand was proving to be too much for the deck to handle. This single change dropped Infect off the top tier list. Some players on Hard Copium tried to replace it with Peak, but having to pay actual mana for the effect proved too much, and Peak wasn't ever truly accepted as a replacement. But this banning wasn't the only change in Modern that affected Infect. Just like in my video on Bogles, the improved efficiency and catch-allness of Modern's removal is the bane of linear decks. And hey, at least the creatures in Bogles are hexproof. Infect's reliance on Blossoming Defense, Vines of Vastwood, or Hand Attack to stop opponents' removal is a glaring weakness in modern times. Off the top of my head, the printing of Fatal Push, March of Otherworldly Light, Prismatic Ending, Leyline Binding, Orcish Bowmasters, and Galvanic Discharge were all solid printings of cheap, efficient removal. The printings of these powerful and efficient removal pieces became such a problem that Infect decks have shifted away from blue in favor of black to consistently get off turn 1 hand attack and its ace in the hole, Phyrexian Crusader. Phyrexian Crusader is one of the best answers to the current Modern removal suite. With red and white decks being so popular, Crusader not only blanks the most popular removal, but is unblockable to the majority of creatures. Despite this, Infect is still struggling to push through the removal suites that Modern decks run. And without Git Probe, it seems like all hope is lost. But that hasn't stopped Infect players from trying to fill the hole. Infect, notably Blue Infect, has tried many times to fill the hole that Gitaxian Probe's banning left behind. They truly suffer from new toy syndrome. Teferi Time Raveler's printing caused Infect to go Bant for a bit, which was continued with the printing of Giver of Runes. Both cards offered solid protection for both your Infect creatures and your combo turn. Giver of Runes was able to give your Infect creatures protection, so it was a must-answer threat, and Teferi Time Raveler shut off your opponent's instant speed removal on your turn. When Uro was legal, Infect ran it. Officially because it offered solid game against Jund, a miserable Infect matchup at the time, and it was a way to grind against decks like Burn and Prowess. Unofficially, it's cause Uro was just a broken card and they happened to be in the colors for it. Once Upon a Time was utilized as a way to cut down on lands and creatures, allowing the deck to maximize pump spells and increase the potential for a quick kill. Infect ran the infamous bird Nadu, Winged Wisdom, until its recent banning in one of the most fair ways it was used in Modern, as it pairs extremely well with Infect's creature targeting nature. While it lasted, Nadu gave Infect a solid value engine, effectively stapling draw a card onto each pump spell. But no matter how hard they try, Gitaxian Probe is never coming back. And despite all the attempts to try and fill the hole that it left, none of the attempts have been enough to return Infect back to its glory days. And now at this point you might be thinking to yourself, now hold on, wait. I've seen resurgences of Infect while I've played Modern. It has cropped up at the top tables from time to time, and you're exactly right. But the reason that Infect has popped up at top tables from time to time in these resurgences has nothing to do with unbannings or new cards printed for it, and everything to do with incoming bannings. When is Infect the hero of the story? When the tale has reached its darkest hour. Infect, once a controversial deck archetype, has risen in resurgences several times over Modern's history, fighting at top tables against linear Modern decks. When KCI was at the top tables of Modern, who was right there with them? Infect. When Hogak was threatening a win on turn 1, who could pull off a match win out of the board? Infect. When 4-color Yorion piles were dominating a post-Lurrus world, who rose to the occasion? Infect. When Infect is in the spotlight as a prominent deck in the format, something is wrong and something needs to change. And when those changes eventually do come, Infect steps out of the spotlight, its role fulfilled. But maybe it's time once again for the alarm bells to ring. At the RCQ at SCGCon Tampa, Infect, piloted by Quinn Reed, put up a solid 12th place finish into a format that is filled with interaction. This list, a Sultai variant, runs 3 mainboard duress as a way to clear away interaction. As mentioned before, it runs way more creatures than the Infect lists of old. But what kind of decks are we currently seeing in the Modern metagame? There's Ruby Storm, a linear combo deck that Infect can definitely race pre and post board. This is something they've done in the past. Domain Zoo only runs 8 removal spells total, and both are damage based and 1 is sorcery speed, so that makes it much easier to play around. Mardu Energy proves more of a challenge due to cards like Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, and Orcish Bowmasters, but Boros Energy struggles more to remove its creatures, especially Phyrexian Crusader. Another thing we're seeing in Modern right now is a ton of decks utilizing the power of the One Ring. While the ring does give a bit of breathing room, decks that utilize the One Ring tend to run less hard removal overall, relying instead on the sheer draw power and looping of the ring's protection effect. And what deck can beat a turn 4 ring? Infect, with a turn 2 or turn 3 kill. Perhaps the 12th place finish of Infect at SCG Tampa shows that there was one more card Wizards should have banned alongside Nadu and Grief. Infect started its run in Modern as a controversial deck with a tilting win condition. It fought through the Modern metagame to become a top deck in a format that no longer exists. The banning of Gitaxian Probe was the first nail in the coffin for Infect, and while many deck builders have tirelessly worked to fill that hole has never been truly filled. The printing of more efficient and powerful removal and the shift away from linear decks were the final nails in Infect's coffin. And it was really weird for a time seeing Infect shift from such a hated, tilting deck to the hero of several linear Modern formats. Whenever the format became bad, you could count on Infect fighting at the top table, swinging in for turn 3 lethal, and their opponent realizing in horror that their linear combo deck had no removal in it, and they couldn't get rid of this single creature. But despite these resurgences in troubled times, it wasn't enough to stop Infect from fading into the background once more.